Me, right?
Yes, I can hear you, Nitin.
Okay. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the TAM R&D webinar series. I will quickly introduce myself. I am Nitin Yati. I am a TAM in VMware in Mumbai, working with VMware since 5 years now. So I'll be hosting this webinar. So this is our fourth webinar of the TAM R&D webinar series. We have done webinars on what's new in VMC on AWS, what's new in vSphere 6.7, and architecture overview of vSAN before. The topic of today's webinar is architecture overview of enterprise PKS. So since there is a lot of traction on containers and Kubernetes, we thought a session on enterprise PKS will be helpful for the TAM customers. So I'll also introduce the presenter today. Lakshmi Gayatri is going to present the webinar on architecture overview of PKS. She is a staff engineer in VMware R&D and has got 16 years of experience. She has extensively worked on cloud native applications, containers, Kubernetes, and PKS. And she has also presented on containers and all these topics in different VMworks across different regions. So before we start, just want to set some basic ground rules. I have muted everyone. So if you have any questions, you can put that in the Q&A window at the bottom. We will be constantly monitoring it and we'll try and answer it there itself. But if there's any question which is left unanswered, we'll try to have a Q&A, 10 minutes of Q&A in the end, where you can unmute yourself and then ask the question directly to the presenter. This session is getting recorded, so if you need this recording, feel free to reach out to your respective TAMs. So I think we can start now. To start, Lakshmi, over to you.
Thanks, Nitin. Hi all, good afternoon, and thanks for taking time to attend the session. This being a short week, you must be really having piles of work to do at work. So thanks for your time, and I promise that you will have a very good takeaways by the end of the session. So like, PKS, right? It is a pivotal container service. So this provides Kubernetes as a service for both on-prem and cloud environments. And it has a fully supported up-to-date Kubernetes distro. But before we move on to talk about enterprise PKS, what it does, how it does, let us take a step back and just have spent a couple of minutes on containers. So what is a container? So this is the typical picture what comes to anybody's mind when it comes to a container, the shipping yard. So the container, what it's actually is, it's nothing but a standard unit of software that packages up the code and its dependencies so the application runs quickly and reliably. And also it is portable. Like as a container which you see here, this can be taken to any place. So any place here is any cloud. We can run a container on any cloud, and the container app is built in such a way that it is agnostic to the infrastructure challenges, the changes, the networking, the storage, and other aspects. Now, how are these containers gaining so much of momentum in modern applications? And what are these modern applications? Why do we say cloud native applications? So the containers have speed, they are lightweight, and they are portable. So speed in the sense, they enable fast application evolution in order to tailor to the customer experience. So they are fast and they enable rapid rates of change. The second is lightweight and third is portable, which means we can move applications from one environment to another. So say for example, I have built a container application on my laptop and I'll be able to run the same container application on Azure, AWS, vSphere or OpenStack without making any changes to the application itself. But most of the time we would have seen challenges wherein the developers will come and say that, hey, it works perfectly fine on my laptop, but when we push it to the production environment, it's failing with some errors. So these kind of challenges will make the adaptation to cloud hard, because of the dependencies. So that's when containers, because of the portability, the speed and lightweight what they offer, they are becoming the answer to all the challenges with cloud native poses. If we have one container on the laptop, it's very easy to manage, but think of having containers in production. If we have several containers or several applications in production, how are we going to manage all this? Is just having Kubernetes, which is one of the primary orchestration for containers, is going to be enough? No, it's not. Running applications in production will have a lot of operational challenges. We'll have to take care about security, performance, resource management, scalability, availability, data persistence, networking, and monitoring. And there are a lot of challenges, right? Because most of us have come from VI admin persona, we exactly know like what are the problems which we have in production with respect to applications. And containerized applications are also not very different when it comes to challenges. So now let's see the container orchestration. Orchestration means automation. The ease at which, so most of the technologies which are there in the real world, they become easily adaptable only if they have tools which are easy to make the usage easy. So Kubernetes is one such orchestration platform for containers. We also have Docker and Mesos. But here in this chart, if you see, this is taken from CNCF survey, Cloud Native Computing Foundation survey of 2018. And this shows above 80% of customers are using Kubernetes for the orchestration of containers. And because we all come from VI admin persona, so I had worked in VMware. I'm still working in VMware, and it's my 13th year here. So I started as a VI admin person, and then I used to work on vCenter server development, and then slowly moved on to the containers, and then on to the PKS, and then I'm doing a lot of things on Kubernetes now. So this is one slide which is going to be the slide for VI admins to quickly understand what is coming in Kubernetes, which is comparable to what we already know. So vCenter server, most of you must be familiar with this. If not, vCenter appliance is a management software. It's a virtualization software that helps you manage your compute, your storage, networking, and several aspects. Similar to vCenter appliance, which we have for management, on the Kubernetes side, we have a Kubernetes master. Kubernetes master can be a physical machine or virtual machine. For us, vCenter is an appliance. Earlier, we also used to have a vCenter on Windows flavor that could be on a physical machine also. vCenter has a database. We have Postgres database for VC appliance. And for Kubernetes, we have etcd. etcd is like a KV store, in which all the critical data with respect to Kubernetes is stored. How do we connect to vCenter? We connect using a web client. We go to https://vcip. Similarly, for Kubernetes, we use either for GUI, we use kubedash, which is nothing but Kubernetes dashboard. Also, we have a CLI method which using the command called kubectl. And vSphere clusters are similar to the K8s node cluster. See, this is a vSphere HADRS cluster which has ESX host. Similar to that, Kubernetes nodes cluster will have nodes. These nodes can be physical servers or they can be virtual machines. And in HADRS cluster, we do create resource pools so that we have a quota, we have a reservation. Similar to resource pool, the same construct in Kubernetes is a namespace. So this is the similarity. I hope you can visualize. So we'll have a database, we have a management server, and then we have participating nodes in that and resource pools. And just like any compute needs storage, data stored or an RDM connected, we also have volumes and persistent volumes. Now, what is the difference between a volume and a persistent volume? As the name says, right? Anything which is persistent, any data which needs to stay over time, will have to go to persistent volume. And any data which we really don't care to retain it for a longer period of time or to have it constantly available, that we can put it on an ephemeral storage or a simple volume. And for networking, on vSphere side also we have NSXT and NSXV for managing. But for containers on the PKS side, we use NSXT. There are certain benefits of NSXT which we will see in few slides from now on. Now here are a few of the challenges which I had mentioned earlier. And the answer is VMware Enterprise PKS is going to address all these challenges. Now let us take a look at VMware Enterprise PKS. The key features which are these 5 features are very important, and they were building a very strong ecosystem. The first one being the high availability, the health monitoring and self-healing at the cluster infra level and also at the app level. So when I say app level, app means application. Over a period of time, we do not care about where my application is running. I don't have to think like, okay, this virtual machine, I had installed this application, so it is running there. Or this is a physical host which is hosting my application. So when it comes to cloud, it's very hard for us to maintain the, or even to keep a track of the infrastructure which is being hosted. It has to be as elastic as possible. So all we care about is apps. And then we shouldn't be really looking at where the apps are running. For the end user, for the customer or the developer who are accessing the apps, they just need the app to be up and running. But they are not worried about where the app is hosted. But the way the app is hosted, that comes on the provider side of business. And here you see a word called BOSH. So BOSH is a Cloud Foundry project that unifies release engineering, deployment, and lifecycle management of cloud software. So this BOSH is from open source. We are using BOSH in PKS. I'll also show the deliverables and also how to download from some pointers on how to drop the builds into the vCenter environment. And next is highly secure. We have isolation at cluster level, network level, and all this is supported by NSXT. We also have multi-tenancy. So we use clusters and namespaces as a unit of multi-tenancy, like how we have seen resource pools, right? Even though all the ESX, all the VMs on a cluster can be placed under one single DRS cluster, the reason why we create the resource pools is for the logical grouping of virtual machines. Same construct, we can use it in PKS also. And the next one is easy to use and scale. We can deploy clusters on demand via PKS control plane. And it also has automatic patching, upgrading, and scaling. Why is this required? Why do you have to have clusters getting deployed on demand? The reason is in enterprises, whenever we are running on cloud or even on-prem, the load can become unpredictable at times. Like recently, we had a festival, and then during that festival, the Amazon and Flipkart actually posted a lot of sales, and then the demand for buying things had grown up drastically. At that point of time in cloud, we cannot expect a person to be in front of the system, monitor the load, and then create clusters at the backend. That on-demand creation should be automatic. It should monitor the load, the demand for the demand, and matching the demand, the load or the supporting system has to be built. This is why this feature is very important. And also this automatic patching and upgrading. If you have noticed, Kubernetes gets released once in every 3 months, the major release. I mean, patches and security fixes keep coming. And also over a period of time, Kubernetes also removes the support for the older versions. So what happens is, unless and until we keep ourselves up to date with the Kubernetes versions, it is very hard for us to keep up with the upstream. It's always recommended to have software with the latest version of Kubernetes, latest supported version of Kubernetes. PKS actually bundles supported version of Kubernetes along with the package. And we have highly integrated ecosystem. So these are all the VMware, the Wavefront is a product of VMware, which is for monitoring. I will also show some dashboards from Wavefront, like how we can visualize the clusters, the load, the performance, because it's very easy. Only if we have a dashboard, we can visualize data better. Even if it is there in database, without charts, it's very hard to know the peaks and find out the sweet spots. Next is Log Insight. This is another product what we have for analysis of logs. Network Insight, it is also known as vRealize Network Insight, vRealize Automation, and Prometheus, Grafana, Istio, and Aegir. So these are the integrated ecosystem tools. We'll have demo for Wavefront. I have a demo, so which I'll be showing it. And now we have this question whenever we go to customer, like, okay, Kubernetes is there. So what extra thing is that which VMware is offering? So if you see this, you'll be surprised that Kubernetes here is just one layer in the entire stack. We cannot have only Kubernetes being shipped. It needs a lot of support from the ecosystem, which is what VMware is offering. So just take a look at the pictures here. So if you have to build a container service stack in your data center for the developer team, then you'll have to take care of compute, network configuration, storage, and infrastructure. In addition, the applications are expected to dynamically scale, and the underlying infrastructure platform needs to be rapidly scaled to the demand. So which means we need to have the elasticity. But is it possible to add the physical hosts on demand from the backend? It's not possible. Say, for example, if it is a vSphere environment, we already had created a cluster with the 96 hosts or 64 hosts. In that case, we cannot add another ESX host on demand just because the load is increasing. But we can provision another cluster of a HADRS cluster and then still balance out the load based on the demand. And these are the similarities what we have. We need virtual infrastructure for the container stack because all these containers run on virtual infrastructure. We have vSphere there. For persistence, which is storage, we have vSAN and Hatchway. I'll explain about Hatchway when we talk about storage in detail. We also need to have our stack secure and have networking for that. So we are using NSXT. And how do we maintain the monitoring? So if you notice, all the ones which I have mentioned here were the challenges which came out of the survey. So the cluster health monitoring, healing, and lifecycle management, we have BOSH for that. I have a demo wherein now I have a slide where I can show like if one of the worker goes down, how BOSH is going to spin another one. And we have lifecycle management, which is done by the PKS control plane. And this is the only thing. You see, Kubernetes is just one layer of the entire container service stack. So if we want to have Kubernetes in our environment, we just can't have this one layer. It needs to have all the supporting layers, which is coming just with one set of enterprise PKs. And image registry is Harbor. If some of you are aware of a product called vSphere Integrated Containers, there we have Harbor, which is embedded into the VIC. And Harbor itself is another project which is promoted to CNCF by VMware, which does image registry. It's a private image registry. So what is the meaning of image registry is we'll be able to store our images locally on-prem. We don't have to push the images to cloud. On cloud, there are a lot of solutions to push the images. And apart from that, we also need to have monitoring, logging, and analytics. For monitoring and logging, we'll be using Wavefront. For logging, we use Log Insight. So the VMware PKS introduces a much similar way to build the complete stack. So all these, you get it in one box with the enterprise PKS. So it's not just the Kubernetes. The crux of this slide is it's not just Kubernetes. There's a whole ecosystem around Kubernetes that is needed to make it work. While Kubernetes is at the heart of the container orchestration, there are numerous other things like make or break factors. So when evaluating the container platforms, we'll also have to consider the entire supporting stack. Now let's take a look at the architecture of PKS. Yeah, so here Wavefront we are using for monitoring purpose for PKS. So we have vSphere, storage we have vSAN, we have public cloud and public storage. So public cloud storage is something which containers leverage extensively for persistent data. And the entire PKS plane, we have a PKS control plane. We have a container registry. These are the things which we just saw in the previous slide. And then we have BOSH, which is used for lifecycle management of containers. These are the Kubernetes clusters. Each Kubernetes clusters, as we had seen in the slide where we were comparing Kubernetes with vSphere, it has a database, which is etcd. It has a master and worker. Worker are the ones wherein the applications will be running. And we have to secure all this, the control plane. For monitoring, we have Wavefront and VROps. For logging, it is Log Insight. For more details into networking and troubleshooting, we have Network Insight. And VRA is for the automation of the entire stack. We'll also go in more details once we see a few slides, the slides which are coming up next. And switching gears slightly. So if you want to get started with the Ops Manager or PKS, we'll have to download the bits from network.pivotal.io. So Pivotal has been recently acquired by VMware. The announcement had come in. So the software for Ops Manager and BOSH and PKS has to be downloaded from this link, which is given here. As you see in this, for the 2.7 release, the ones which are checked, you see Pivotal Ops Manager for vSphere. So in order to have the VM for vSphere, we know that it has to be in an OVF or a OVA format. So this file actually has it like a OVA format. For OpenStack, the format of the file is raw. The reason why I'm showing this is to tell you that Enterprise PKS is supported not just on vSphere, but also on 4 different clouds. One is OpenStack, GCP, Azure, and AWS. So depending upon the cloud solution what we have, the installable can be downloaded from network.pivotal.io. I have a quick demo wherein I'll explain the things, whatever we have seen so far in the slides. We'll just see how they look. So the one which you are seeing now is the Ops Manager. So in the previous slide, we have downloaded the Ops Manager for vSphere because our demo and presentation is going to focus on vSphere. Just a second, let me take a sip of water. Yeah, so this is the Ops Manager login. It says Pivotal, and then we'll have to give the username and password. So this VM we have downloaded as an OVA and deployed it on a vSphere environment. So here you see 3 components like this. The UI is little different from what we see on vSphere. So, so please try to follow me along when the demo is going on. So what we see here is the BOSH director for vSphere. Similarly, if we have multiple clouds, we will have BOSH director for GCP, BOSH director for AWS, like that. So BOSH is required to do the lifecycle management. So which means it has to talk to the IaaS. I have a slide wherein I'll explain the steps which are involved. And this is enterprise PKs, which is what we are discussing. And also Harbor. Harbor we have seen it is for the image repository. These 3, we actually call them as tiles in Ops Manager. So this is the installation dashboard. So this is the PC of Ops Manager. So when we import a product in Ops Manager, the extension of the file will be .pivotal. We'll have to take it from network.pivotal.io, and then we will be able to download all these. And when we download Enterprise PKS, we don't have to download Kubernetes again. It comes embedded, and that to the latest and the supported version of Kubernetes will be coming along with Enterprise PKS. So we are assured that anytime with Enterprise PKS latest when we take, we'll also have a supported version of Kubernetes. These are the versions of the software which we can see at the bottom left corner. And this icon, when we click, the tile is going to get deleted and the corresponding VMs, everything will be gone. So let's go on with the demo. As you know, this is BOSH director for vSphere. So what are the things which we need to pass are all vCenter specific things. Like we need to say, what is my vCenter host FQDN or IP address? What is the username and password? And what is the data center on which I want to configure my PKs? So yeah, let me pause here. So here is what is like ephemeral data store and persistent data store. So persistent data store is something which we usually keep it out of the box because we want to persist the data. Usually this is for high availability as well. We don't keep our data on the same tree as on which we are standing. We'll just keep it far away so that in case there is something happens to this site, at least we have a backup somewhere. So persistent data store, it is supported for vSAN, we have NFS and VMFS also. And ephemeral data store, like you see that I have given the same thing, but in ephemeral data store, the folders, whatever get created, they are not persisted, which means whenever you delete the data or something, everything is cleaned up. In persistent data store, unless and until we explicitly delete the content on the persistent data store, the data will exist even if the containers or the application along with the persistent data is removed. And now we'll also give some networking like vCenter standard networking, and then NSX networking is with respect to NSX-V or NSX-T. So that details about what networking it uses, and director config just needs the NTP server name. And yeah, this is interesting. So if some of you had worked on cloud or at least know a few things about the basics of cloud, we also have availability zones there. So even in enterprise PKS, we create availability zones. So you might be surprised, like on vCenter, how do we create availability zones? Are they like different clusters? How do we map them? Either you can have it in different clusters, or you can have it within the same cluster. We can have it them like a resource pool. So here we have 4 availability zones: PKS-infra and PKS-AZ1, AZ2, AZ3. So if you see here, this is the name of the availability zone, and this is a cluster, and this is a resource pool. So within that cluster, we have resource pools which are mapped to the availability zones. So there is an advantage of using availability zones. They help us have more availability. And then in case anything goes wrong with a particular set of hosts or anything, then we have a high availability. So you see here that we have 3 availability zones, right? All the availability zones we created are actually resource pools under the same cluster. And this is the ops manager we have deployed, 1.5. And there are VMs here. It's not necessary that all the availability zones have to be writing data. It depends upon how we configure them. Now let's move on to the network part. So this networking for BOSH director, it should be coming from NSXT. So the logical switch we have, which is here. So this logical switch is actually created on NSXT, and it is realized on vCenter server. So PKS heavily uses NSX-T, wherein BOSH director can have NSX-V also as part of vCenter config. So if we go to networking tab, right? So here, whatever networking we see, I mean, this is a long list, so just bear for a minute. Yeah, so we have wellness management network. These are alphabetically placed, so we'll have to go really down. Yeah, so the PKS LS management network is what we have given as a configuration. So this network will be used to create the virtual machines when we are deploying, because currently we are still in the deployment phase. And yeah, this is the most important part. In enterprise PKS, what we do, the availability zones will be created on the IaaS, infrastructure as a service, which can be vSphere or anything else. And here with the PKS API, we have to configure a few things like the API host name, and the moment we give API host name, the certificate is read and exposed. Next is plans. Yeah, so this is interesting. The plan, when we have about 13 plans here. Plans will help us plan better for our workloads. Say, for example, when I started learning, I'll just have a small plan, maybe for my application, which is a Flask and application, which I need to just give it for, say, 50 users. I'll have a small or a medium plan. But in case I'll have to give it to 5,000 users, I'll have to have my app to be used by 5,000 users. Then I'll be using a large plan. So what it means is, when we have a small plan, according to that layout, we will have the VMs, the masters and worker node, CPU and memory configured. So there are few things like we can also choose which, because as you remember, right, availability zone 1 had lot of VMs and AZ2 was blank, because we have chosen AZ1 for the small plan and then created a lot of clusters on that. That is the reason on the vCenter under the resource pool of PKS AZ1, we had lot of virtual machines which were deployed as part of this plan. And this is a micro size of the VM, like one CPU, 1 GB RAM, and disk is 8 gigs. These are some of the things, but we don't have to go in detail of each one. We have very good documentation for enterprise PKs. And the next important thing is Kubernetes cloud provider. So here, this cloud provider will have to choose the IaaS. So this is the place where we are choosing the IaaS. So in the BOSH detector, what we did, we just created Ops Manager. We told Ops Manager to go and sit on vSphere because we had vSphere. Now next, now we can choose between cloud providers. We can choose between GCP. You see GCP here, right? I have not selected it because I don't intend to use that. I have selected vSphere because we wanted to use vSphere for enterprise PKs. We also have AWS and Azure. You can see here. So out of these four, we can use anything. With vSphere, we have added advantage because we have a very strong ecosystem. And next is logging. Logging, we have seen it is syslog. If we have syslog, then we can use log insight for the product. So that is a configuration what we have. We realize log insight, and also we need to give the log insight host details here so that the logs start getting streamed there. And log insight also helps us create very good dashboards. It provides insights about where exactly the error is. It correlates with the resources of the system. A log correlation is very easy. Yeah, another aspect here. With respect to networking, we support two types of networking. One is Flannel, the other one is NSXT. There is an advantage of using NSXT over Flannel because NSXT supports microsegmentation, and there are a lot of features which it provides which are not in Flannel. There are certain parameters which we need to fulfill for NSXT manager because this enterprise PKs will be using NSXT, and all the required and inventory objects will be created on NSXT. UA is user access control, UAAC, that we can configure, and monitoring also we'll see now. Yeah, so these are just for the API access token, some of the things. These are all by default, so we don't have to explicitly change anything. And this one is for monitoring. We are using Wavefront. And once it is configured, we can, okay, let me pause the recording here. Yeah, and then let's, so we have seen the networking part, storage, monitoring, and logging. We have seen it in the demo. Harbor, we are not covering because we just have 1 hour today. So let us see, we have seen the common challenges. We have seen what PKS does. Now let's see how PKS is solving all these problems. Now, typically, we segregate operations in enterprise like day 0, day 1, and day 2 operations. So in day 1 operations, we are calling it like having some deployments going on and then having some APIs and constructs all set. And for day 2 is when we do all the heavy lifting, wherein these are the operations which are not just for day 2, but they continue till day n. There is no stop for that. So it is like constant monitoring is required and self-healing. How do we have self-healing? So which means if any virtual machine or any node is having a failure, we'll have to detect it. Usually, see, I had been on the VI side for a very long time. So the tendency is whenever the VM goes wrong, we try to fix it. But in the Kubernetes land, instead of fixing it, what we do is we deploy another VM and then just get the application going. So we don't worry about the repairing or spend time in debugging like why the virtual machine has failed. So this brings in a different kind of a thought process of treating virtual machines or infrastructure as cattle as compared to pets. Yeah, this is an important slide, so please pay attention here. So this is what, like how it works is what I'll be explaining. So we have Bosch, which we said that it is going to manage, it is from open source, it comes from Cloud Foundry. Bosch has CPI. The CPI is cloud provider interface. So depending upon which cloud we choose, the corresponding CPI will be communicating with the IaaS. Why does Bosch have to talk to IaaS? Because it has to manage the VMs and VM state, right? So in case VMs are going bad, so it has to detect the failure and then create new VMs. In order to create new VMs, it has to talk to IaaS for the provisioning.
Lakshmi, sorry to interrupt you. Looks like there is a confusion. So if you see the Q&A window, Madhu Sutanan has asked, is it VM or container that you're talking about?
Yeah, so our
Will it be
containers
container?
run inside VM, Madhu.
Okay.
They
So
can
this is
also
container
run
in a
on
VM.
physical machines, but then in PKS, we are running containers on VM because they also provide a double wall of security. Nitin, do you want me to type answer also, or is it okay if I
No,
answer?
that is fine. I typed the answer.
Okay,
That's
okay.
fine.
Thank you. Thanks, Madhu, for asking that question. Because sometimes these containers, right, they can also run on physical environment, but we won't be able to scale up much. The moment we have anything on physical environment, we'll have to take care about maintenance, hardware, BIOS upgrades, patching. There is a lot of work. So that's when we do it like one level above by using vSphere, and we have this DRS and HA, wherein in case, even if in case your physical hardware is going down, since you are running containers on virtual machines, we are always high available with respect to applications. So all your hosts in the cluster, we don't take it out for maintenance in one shot. Okay, coming back to this. Along with PKS, we also have the Kubernetes version, which is the supported version. This is CFCR. So CFCR is nothing but Cloud Foundry Container Runtime. So Kubernetes and Bosch is in that. And then see the ecosystem that is getting built. So this entirely is called PKS control plane. This is very similar to the architecture diagram which we have seen, wherein we had PKS control plane, we had Bosch, and then we also had Harbor and some service brokers. This is interesting. So NSXT, we are saying it is a networking solution. What is CNI? CNI is Container Network Interface. Like how you have a cloud provider interface to talk to IaaS, in order to talk to NSXT, Kubernetes uses CNI. In our demo and our LAN, we are using IaaS as vSphere. Okay. And then, see, these are the day one, day two operations as we spoke about, right? Scaling, patching, upgrades, failure detection, all these things. Now we'll do a simple thing wherein we'll see if at all there is a create cluster by name, say Kubernetes K8s-1, and N3 means nodes 3, worker nodes 3. According to Kubernetes limits, on a single worker, we can run 110 pods. Now what is a pod? Pod is nothing but a group of containers which are brought up at the same time. So pod can have one container or pod can have n number of containers. Now, when this command is issued by the user, the PKS user, so what happens is it actually talks to the Bosch and then starts provisioning VMs. So we wanted to have 3 clusters. Okay, it went very quickly. So let me show you again. So K8s-1 is one cluster with 3 nodes. Okay, next is K8s-2 and then K8s-3. So we have 3 clusters. And if you see, focus on this, the third cluster, third node actually failed. In this scenario, what do we do in case if in case Kubernetes was not there, we detect the failure through our monitoring mechanisms, provision another VM or repair this one. So now what BOSH does is, it decommissions the node which is failing, talk to the vSphere, and then provision a new node and joins this node to the Kubernetes cluster services, so that the cluster is again back and healthy. Otherwise, Wavefront will actually start showing that the cluster is unhealthy. So we'll know by monitoring we will know. So BOSH is going to detect the failure, provision the node, and start the Kubernetes services and register the VM with the cluster master. Now we have three nodes each, and then as I said, each node can take up till 110 pods. So totally this is taking 330 pods. So what in case we cannot have 330 pods in one cluster? We want more. Then how do? We don't have to delete the whole thing and create it with 5 nodes, but we have a resize option. So in the resize option, -n is 5. So which means the 4th and 5th worker nodes will get created. If you see now, cluster 3 has 4 and 5 nodes extra. Now let us see networking. So this is so NSXT has lot of features, though this session is not only on NSXT, and in the interest of time I'll have to quickly skim through. It's already 3:45. So this is micro segmentation. I hope most of you are aware, but so this is a very beautiful security technique that enables fine-grained security policies, and also to the workload level. So we actually can go down till the logical port of each workload when we do micro segmentation. And NSXT also has lot of operational tools which will help us to not only have a good visibility about the container networks, but it will also help us to do the troubleshooting. Because when it comes to enterprises and large data, right, there is so much of traffic going on left and right. There are T0 routers, T1 routers. It's very hard to debug unless and until we can have a visualization tool like this.
So Lakshmi, we have one more question from Piyush Srivastav. We'll have to answer this. Is Kubernetes using replica set to spin up a new pod for the failed pod?
Kubernetes has this replica set concept wherein we can say that this is my replica set and do it. Piyush, for native Kubernetes, what you say is absolutely right, because for any time the pods and other things, we use a replica set to maintain so many replicas of the workers. But here in PKS, we don't have to create an application with replica set because that BOSH takes care of it. So that is the reason we are using BOSH. There is no overhead on the DevOps user. So BOSH takes care of the Kubernetes application and also the pod spinning. But in native Kubernetes, it is on the DevOps user to take the extra pain of creating a replica set.
Okay.
Yeah, I answered it online, Nitin.
Yeah.
So that's gone.
You.
Okay, so quickly on the data store, right? As earlier I was saying, we don't want to keep the persistent data with us. Now, first thing, containers are not going to stay for long. They don't have a life for like 60 years or 70 years like humans. They are very, very ephemeral. So they just live till the job is done, and when they exit, they get killed. So this is very similar to an example wherein when we receive a salary notification or credit to our bank accounts, we all will get an SMS blast. So the SMS is actually a stateless job. It just needs to know the amount of the money that is getting credited, and also the mobile number of the person. It doesn't even address me saying that hi Lakshmi Gayatri, and also it is just a blanket message having just a couple of inputs, and also third input is the time when you got the credit. And do you think the VMs or the workload or the containers which are actually sending this have to live for the entire 30 days? No. It's just that on that day when the credit is going to come or something, they just plan to send out this. So it's the life of the content is also very short. But in case we'll have to persist certain data, then we'll have to use the out of the box storage. And this is the advantage what this project Hatchway, this is a link to the GitHub link. You can actually see, and it has a lot of good data. It offers a storage infrastructure choices for container environments from HCI. And it supports vSAN and the SAN and NAS storage. Right? Usually we have fiber channel and network attached storage in our labs. It provides a capability of extending to that. And the data services such as snapshot, cloning, encryption, deduplication, and compression are also provided at the container volume granularity. So this link is what you can just check.
We have one more question, Lakshmi.
Yeah.
So it is not in the Q&A window, it's there on the chat. Do
Okay.
we support vertical scaling for the VMs in the cluster mode?
Yes, correct. We do. We do vertical scaling. We do horizontal scaling. I don't have a demo for that, but I would love to show if we have time.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. So
So,
that was a question from Sandeep Pawar.
okay, I didn't see that. Oh, I'm not monitoring this Zoom chat. Okay. Thanks, Nathan.
No
So we
worries.
don't have much time. I have another demo to show. So let me quickly go through this. And
Sure.
monitoring and logging, we have already seen about Wavefront. So these are the dashboards. Wavefront has very good dashboarding when it comes to PKS. You can actually configure how many pods are there within the pods, how many pod containers are running, your deployment services, replica set. This was a question which was also asked, right? So all these things we can monitor, and in case anything is having an issue, it's very easy for us to detect and know the time. We can also collect logs using kubectl logs. And security. Don't get scared with this slide. So just the thing is, enterprise PKS also has a lot of defense mechanism with respect to security threats, because security has become one big concern over a period of time. Even though we think that we are building very robust security applications, these are all cloud native applications. So the OSS, the files, the open source code which is coming, it might be having some glibc code which has a problem, and that shows up in our products as well. So that's when the defense mechanism is very strong. We have app monitoring by Wavefront, and then we also have Harbor, which does this wall scans at the image level itself. So it also gives out a very good report in case there are any critical vulnerabilities or any issues we find. It actually shows out all the issues, and we can quarantine that image itself. Okay.
Lakshmi, two more questions.
Okay.
So can we integrate VROPs with
Yeah, Jagadish.
PKS?
Yeah, we can integrate VROps with this, because
I saw
Wavefront
that in your
instance is
slides.
the cloud instance. Yeah, I'm seeing that. Wavefront is a cloud instance, right? So VROps on-prem, if we have, we can integrate. And VROps also does a very good job with respect to metric collection and also showing the dashboards. We can create our custom dashboards also, though VROps also provides good number of dashboards with respect to resource utilizations and all that. So I think another question is there. Where Docker engine is installed, is it on ESXi or every VM running as a container? Good question, Rinkesh. So this Docker engine, when it gets created, right, in the PKS VM, when we do a cluster create, it will be in the master. We have a Kubernetes master and Kubernetes workers also. So it goes into those VMs. So it will not be there inside the pods, but it will go into the virtual machines. Okay. Yeah, so yes, let us do this demo quickly, wherein you can see the PKS commands, like how they run. Yeah, so once we have PKS deployed, we have a CLI. You have seen that in the demo I showed, right? In the slide I said PKS space create cluster, which will actually start provisioning. This is very simple to use, and most of the VI admins, we love to have CLIs for ease of management of things rather than heavy APIs. So we'll have to log into to the UAA server. All these details are there in the documentation also. I'll quickly show you like how to create and also how to access applications. See, end of day, it's all about applications. So whatever we did so far, we only did the infrastructure part, like how we configure, the challenges we know, and other things. So these are the commands which are available for PKS. If you are already familiar with kubectl, because from the questions in the Q&A chat, looks like most of you are aware of Kubernetes already. This is going to be a wrapper on top of Kubernetes commands. So very similar to, instead of using kubeadm for bringing up a cluster, you use PKS space create cluster, something like that. And once we have the secrets read, okay, I'm going a little bit into Kubernetes because I see that people are asking a lot of questions on Kubernetes. I'm assuming that they are aware of this. So secrets file is nothing but we have the kubeconfig file when a cluster is created. The moment we read it, we can actually create, use kubectl API to create workloads or deployments or pods and whatnot. VROps can be integrated. Okay. Yeah, security controls in the, okay, there's a question on the chat. Security controls, and maybe I didn't get the question right. We have pod security policies. So wherein we can, by default, it is deny all traffic rules also. So if that's what you're asking, then we have PSPs, pod security policies. And also we have distributed firewalls on NSXT, which provide a security walling. Okay, let's look at the demo now. Yeah, so this is the latest release of PKS, that is 1.5. We released it last month. Just a second, somehow this. Yeah, so in order to create a new cluster, what we do is we say PKS create cluster, name of the cluster, and then we just pass like what is the Kubernetes master host we wanted, because we need to access the master for running some commands. And then -p is nothing but the plan. So in the PKS configurations on the tile, we have seen like what are the plans which are like small, medium, large, that we can plan accordingly. So for now we are creating a small plan. So when we issue a command like this, it says it is creating a cluster. Please see this. It says in progress, operation create, and the cluster is being created. This is the in progress one, what it says. So what basically it does is it will be creating virtual machines on the vCenter. And once it is created, we'll have a state as succeeded. And then we can see the PKS cluster here. See, this is the second line of cluster is what we just created. PKS cluster 406 PKS user 406-2. It's in progress. And then once it completed, the status changed to succeeded. So it took a Kubernetes version of 1.14.5, which came bundled with PKS. The next version of PKS will have the upgraded and newer version of Kubernetes. And we don't have to worry about application upgrades from K8s version 1.15 to 1.15. Sorry, 1.14 to 1.15. Bosch will take care of that. So lifecycle management is completely taken care by Bosch. And then this is the step what we usually use in native Kubernetes to get the secrets. So the moment you get the credentials, right, we'll say we'll have to use the cluster name to get credentials. What do you mean by getting credentials is, now I have a client machine where I have kubectl. I can connect to the Kubernetes master of any machine, but then how will my API know that it has to go and provision on certain Kubernetes master? That is by reading the credentials of that particular cluster. Then it is like we have established connection with like X Kubernetes cluster or a Y Kubernetes cluster. So this is this command is actually there here only. So when you do PKS get clusters, right, in the line here it says you can now switch between clusters. So that is context switching. When you have multiple clusters, we'll have to switch context and then have the current context set to the cluster on which we want to do the work. Now what we will do is, these are the pods we have on all the namespaces, like two namespaces you are seeing here, right? Kube system and PK system. Now we will deploy an application. Say as a VI admin, we have made all the provisioning and everything. And to the DevOps user, we'll have to give them this credentials so that they connect using their kubectl. So from the place where kubectl commands are running, it will be a DevOps persona. And now we will run a application, and then that application we will try to access. Because if at all I'm a DevOps user, right? I don't want to know where the application is coming. I just want Jenkins as a service, or I just want Jenkins just to run my pipeline test for like 2 days or so. So I don't want to take the hassle of creating a virtual machine, installing Jenkins, find out which version of Jenkins I need to install for this operating system. But rather than that, I'll just have a Kubernetes application deployed and then access the Jenkins job. And once I'm done with it, I'm going to delete the deployment. So now we'll do an app which is for the restaurant rating app. which is called YELB. Notice this. The kubectl apply -f. These are like regular Kubernetes commands. We can find them in Kubernetes cheat sheet also. So we have to use the command like apply -f and then give the file path. When we did this, if you notice here, there are 4 containers in creating state. But on top, when we saw, these were not there. They have come after we ran the apply -f command, and they are like Redis database, app server, DB server, and UI server. These are all coming from the YAML file. So the containers are getting created. The deployments are now in ready state. So this is the deployment. You see 1 on 1 means it is ready. 0 on 1 means it is still like in progress. It's not ready. So it's been 33 seconds that this is up. Now RS we have, and then SVC. This is important. So again, this is a Kubernetes construct only. I'm just showing you as a service because whatever we run inside containers, right, the IPs of it keep changing. So in case we want to have an application which has to be accessed externally, we'll have to do it like a service. We have 3 types of service majorly. One is node port, cluster IP, and load balancer. Here I have taken example of load balancer. Okay, and notice that this is the external IP which has come, and this is the port number 80 and 30485. So let's see what happens. Now the YELB UI, so the UI of this app can be accessed at this particular IP address. Let's try to access that. Notice that I have not given the other port number here, because there are 2 port numbers if you have seen, right? One is 80 colon and then the other 5-digit one. The 5-digit one was the internal one which is binded to port 80. That's why on HTTP directly we can see the application. So this is the YELB UI which we have deployed on the Kubernetes cluster. It has a database. That's why all the whatever instances we are hitting, it is recording the instances. And we have the delete. All the commands are also very easy. We can just do pks hyphen and then go ahead. So see, one thing is with these capabilities like high availability, auto scaling, health checks, self-healing, the rolling upgrades of Kubernetes clusters, PKS cares for deployments for infrastructure to the application level. So when we combine it along with the VMware stack, it becomes very powerful, and it takes a full advantage of all the applications we have it on the cloud, and also the second party tools within VMware, what we have like Wavefront, Log Insight, and others. So this is about the talk today. I think we just finished it on time.
Yeah, thank you. Let's wait if they have any more questions. I don't see any question on the Q&A window. So guys, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself now and directly ask Lakshmi.
I'm also checking the Zoom chat. We don't have any questions on that.
Right.
Yeah, and thanks so much for your time. This being a holiday week, and spending 1 hour for listening to something new is really good.
Exactly. So we got a question. Can we map NSXT LBC? NSXT LBC.
Can we map NSXT load balancer? Can we map NSXT
For containers.
balancer? I think they're still typing. See for container. Yeah. So instead of saying container, we'll say it is like a deployment. So what happens is we don't have to create NSXT LB in order to map it. The beauty of PKS is when we create Kubernetes SVC, that load balancer thing which we have seen, right? Automatically on the NSXT side, an LB got created. So otherwise what would have happened, no, traditionally we'll first have to create an LB and then use that LB to publish the service on the container workload. That would have been so tedious. So PKS, because of its tight integration with NSX, it had automated the process so easily that we just don't have to care whether LB is getting created, logical router port is being done, or is BGP there on NSXT. We should be completely agnostic, and then just have our application has to be running. That's the only concern. So whatever is required on the back end with respect to the storage or the NSX or networking side, everything is taken care by NSXT. So I think this question is very good question, because on the native side, right, everything we will only have to construct to do everything and then expose it as a service. But in PKs, we have an advantage of, blindly just go ahead and create whatever is required in the backend is all taken care. So I have answered this question. It was a multi-line question.
Okay. Any more question, guys? You can either use Q&A window or unmute yourself and directly ask question. So Lakshmi, we'll wait for 1 more minute to see if there are any more questions, and then maybe we can close.
Yeah, Nitin. And any more questions, feel free to ask Nitin also for clarifications, or any more details are required.
So Lakshmi, I had a question.
Yeah, Nitin.
When you said we can use Harbor as registry, the local registry,
Yeah.
so can we also replicate registry information from the cloud to this local registry?
No. That means we'll have to explicitly do that operation. It's not automatic. Say, for example, you have a cloud registry, maybe Docker or Docker Hub, or somewhere you have your own Docker Hub ID where you have some pulls. So automatic sync is not possible. You will have to explicitly log in, pull it from there.
But we can do that. We can use proxy server to pull
tag and then push it to the private registry.
Okay, and what is the benefit that we get with local registry? We can do scanning and all that on
Yeah, we can do scanning and all, and also the control, Nitin, because in the public repository, right, when we are pushed, first of all, we need to have access to the public repository, and many organizations, they don't like to keep their software or their images apps in public cloud. So usually there is a, I mean, we have mixed interest of customers. Some of them want to keep only on cloud. Some of them want to keep it only on on-prem. So Harbor is a solution which we are using for on-prem, and Harbor also can do this image scanning, projects, role-based authentication. It can have member modules. Like say your organization has 1,000 people, right? Not all 1,000 people will be able to write to the apps, though they will be able to pull and read.
Right.
So that control also we can pull it in Harbor. Or open source, we have many. JFactory, JFrog, so many we can use.
If the customer is using upstream Kubernetes, in that case, they shouldn't use Harbor, or they can't use Harbor.
No, they can still use Harbor, because Harbor is an individual tile, right? So we can, so Harbor also keeps getting released like once in 3 months or so. And most of the time the timelines are usually mapped with that of PKs. So upstream Kubernetes, in the sense like Kubernetes will be releasing like once in 3 months, or sometimes like in a month also, like 2 releases they can have, the minor versions for security patches. So based on that, your Kubernetes version keep going. The images, when you have it in Harbor, right? So what happens is the Harbor images are like static files. Image only when we at runtime it becomes a container. So in case you have to have a change in the Kubernetes version, we will have to have these images. Just pull them once, and then they will automatically get upgraded to the latest version, because that is what your baseline is. And then once you push it back, then they are updated.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have one more question. Anything for container building in terms of building image with GIT code?
Yeah. So Git. So usually container building, what we have is we have this 5 basic commands. So first we do Docker build with whatever applications layering we do, and then we tag it and then push to the repository. Then from there we pull and run. So that is how we build, and also we use Docker file extensively in order to build these containers, because it's not like 1 or 2 applications, right? You need to have a database application, you need a Flask UI or something, and you also need more details, which are more applications what you need. So all that we can use using Docker file. I mean, Git code, if you want to write, you can. But then Docker file is very simple. You can just have a VI Docker file and then write this 3-4 lines which have the basic OS image and what applications you need to push, and then have this Docker build command, and it's going to build the app for you. And when pushing, you can push it to the public repo, or you can push it to the private repo, whichever is accessible.
Okay, perfect. That's it. We don't have any more questions. We are already out of time. So thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you for this wonderful session. It was pretty insightful. Uh, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar. So the recording will be sent across to your TAMs. So feel free to reach out to your TAMs and get the recording and pass it on to your team members as well who were not able to join. Thanks, Lakshmi, again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nitin. Thank you all. Bye. Have a great
Bye-bye.
week.